Katy Perry killed a nun. Well, kinda. In 2018, an 89-year-old nun walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles and died. Just hours earlier, she looked into a camera and delivered a message directly to Katy Perry.
Please stop. It's not doing anyone any good except hurting a lot of people.
Then she walked into court and she collapsed and unfortunately died. Yo, I'm sixdocs and we upload short documentaries every week and answer the deeper questions you've already thought of. If that sounds interesting or you need something to watch while you eat, consider subscribing now and turning on bell notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's get back to the video. But this wasn't some random encounter. For years, this nun had been fighting Katy Perry over an enormous property in Los Angeles, a former convent. And what started as a disagreement over who should own the property turned into a bizarre legal battle involving two nuns, a pop star, millions of dollars, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and even the Vatican. And the strangest part? Katy Perry wasn't exactly a stranger to religion. She'd been raised by Pentecostal pastors and even started her career singing Christian music. But eventually, that singer with Christian values ended up becoming one of the biggest pop stars on the planet. And now, she wanted to buy a Catholic convent. So how did Katy Perry end up fighting a group of nuns over a property? And how did one of those nuns end up dying in the middle of it? Before Katy Perry ever got involved, there was a mansion. Because this building we're talking about wasn't even built as a convent. In 1927, architect Bernard Maybeck designed the enormous estate for businessman Earl C. Anthony, who was one of the very early radio pioneers in Los Angeles. It was basically a giant private mansion, sitting on around 8 acres and 30,000 square feet in the hills of LA. But over the following decades, the property changed hands, and eventually, it ended up with the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a group of nuns. In the early 1970s, the sisters pulled their own money together and bought the property from Catholic philanthropists Daniel and Bernadine Donahue. For the sisters, this wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was their home. They lived there for decades, but eventually, the religious community began to shrink. By 2011, the remaining sisters had moved out of the convent, and now there was this enormous property sitting empty, while only a handful of elderly sisters remained. So naturally, the question became, what do we do with it? And that's where this story gets complicated. Because the sisters believed they had a right to decide what happened to the property, but the Archdiocese of Los Angeles believed it had the authority to control the property and approve its sale. And those two positions were about to collide. Because the Archdiocese had found a buyer, a very famous one, Katy Perry. In 2015, Katy Perry offered $14.5 million for the property. Her plan was simple. She wanted to turn the former convent into her private home. But the sisters weren't exactly excited about that idea. And this wasn't just because Katy was famous. They knew who she was. Katy had been raised by Pentecostal pastors. She grew up in a deeply religious household. And at the beginning of her career, she actually released Christian music. But by this point, that was a very different Katy Perry.
I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music, but it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil.
The Christian singer had become a global pop star, with songs like I Kissed a Girl and You're So Gay, and a public image that was a long way from the religious environment she grew up in. However, the sisters looked into her music, and Sister Rita Cullinan later admitted she wasn't happy with any of it. So Katy decided to try something herself. Instead of just letting the lawyers handle everything, she met with the sisters. She brought her mother, she even showed them her little Jesus tattoo, and she tried to convince them that she wasn't the person they thought she was. Then she did something that sounds almost too ridiculous to be true. She pulled out her phone, found the lyrics to Oh Happy Day, and sang it for them. But it didn't change their minds. And there was another reason they weren't interested in Katy's deal, because they already had another buyer. Her name was Dana Hollister. Hollister was a Los Angeles restaurateur and a developer, and she was offering $15.5 million. That's $1 million more than Katy's offer. Hollister also had plans to open the property to the public, and by the public I mean she wanted to turn it into a hotel. So from the sisters' perspective, they had a higher offer, they preferred the buyer, and they believed they had the right to make the decision. So they sold it to Hollister. There was just one problem. The Archdiocese had already agreed to sell it to Katy Perry. And now, there were two people claiming they had bought the same property. That's when this whole thing went to court. The legal battle wasn't really about whether Katy Perry was a good person. It wasn't even primarily about whether the sisters liked her music. The real question was, who actually had the legal authority to sell the property? The sisters said they did. They had lived there, they had helped purchase it, and they believed that they had the right to determine what happened to the former home. The Archdiocese disagreed though. It argued that the sisters didn't have the authority to independently sell the property without the necessary approval from Archbishop Jose Gomez. And there was another layer to this, canon law, because this wasn't just a normal house, it was church property. And under Catholic rules, transactions involving church property above a certain value required approval from higher church authorities. The threshold involved in this case was around 7.5 million, and this property was worth more than double that. So the sisters' agreement with Hollister wasn't simply a matter of signing a piece of paper and handing over the keys. There were church rules involved, and the Archdiocese argued that those rules hadn't been followed. Eventually, a Los Angeles judge ruled that the sisters' sale to Hollister was invalid. Katy Perry's parts of the property had been cleared.
This is Sister Catherine Rose. Do you think we could get in?
No, I'm sorry, sister. I can't open the gate.
But Hollister wasn't going anywhere, and neither were the nuns. Because now the battle was no longer just about who got the convent. It was about who had interfered with who, and how much that interference was going to cost. Dana Hollister had already moved into the property. She wanted to turn the enormous estate into a boutique hotel and restaurant. But the courts had ruled that her purchase wasn't valid. And Katy Perry and the Archdiocese weren't satisfied with simply getting the property back. They took the fight further. They argued that Hollister had intentionally interfered with Perry's deal. And in 2017, a jury sided with them. Hollister was ordered to pay millions of dollars in damages, with money going to both Katy Perry's company and the Archdiocese. Then a judge added another 10 million in punitive damages. So this bizarre dispute over an old convent had now turned into a multi-million-dollar legal war. But there was still one more obstacle. Because even after the courts had ruled in Katy's favor, the property still wasn't simply hers. There was another authority that mattered, the Vatican. This is where the story gets even stranger. Remember, this wasn't just a mansion. It had become church property. And because the sale was worth more than the threshold set under church law, higher level approval was required, which meant that even though the courts had cleared the way for Katy Perry, there were still religious requirements that had to be dealt with, and the Vatican became part of the story. The sisters had appealed to higher church authorities, while the Archdiocese was trying to complete the sale, and suddenly, this wasn't just Katy Perry versus two nuns. It was Katy Perry, the nuns, the Archdiocese, Dana Hollister, the courts, and the Vatican, all connected to one property. But by 2018, the legal fight was still generating headlines, and one of the nuns who had been at the center of it was still refusing to back down. Her name was Sister Catherine Rose Holzman. Sister Catherine Holzman was one of the nuns who had fought the sale. She was 89 years old, and she still believed the sisters had been treated very unfairly. Then on March 9th, 2018, she gave what would become her final interview. She looked into a camera and spoke directly to
Katy Perry to please stop. It's not doing anyone any good except hurting a lot of people.
And then she went into the courthouse. The hearing was related to the ongoing legal fallout surrounding the property. Sister Catherine was there, and while inside, she suddenly collapsed. She died, just like that. The woman who had spent years fighting over the convent was dead. And the timing was almost too perfect for the internet to resist. Hours earlier, she had publicly begged Katy Perry to stop. Then she walked into court and died. Suddenly, the story became Katy Perry killed a nun. But that's not what happened. Kinda. See, Katy Perry didn't kill Sister Catherine. There is no evidence that she caused her death. Catherine died suddenly at the age of 89, during a legal battle that had been going on for years. But that's what makes this story so bizarre, because Katy Perry really was at the center of the dispute. She really did want the convent. The nuns really did fight her. They really did try to sell the property to someone else. The courts really did rule against them. The Vatican really did become a part of the dispute. And hours before Sister Catherine died, she really did look into a camera and say, "Katy Perry, please stop." But there was one final twist. Because after all those years, all those lawsuits, all those millions of dollars, and all that fighting, Katy Perry never actually ended up owning the convent. Her option to purchase the property eventually expired. So after everything, Katy didn't get the house. The nuns didn't even get the house. Dana Hollister didn't get the house. And Sister Catherine never got to see how the story ended. So, did Katy Perry kill a nun? Technically no, not literally. But if you put all the pieces together, it's hard to imagine a more insane series of events surrounding a piece of real estate. A pop star, 2 nuns, a mansion, millions of dollars, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, and a woman who begged Katy Perry to stop, only to die in court hours later. So yeah, Katy Perry killed a nun. Kinda.